there might be a critical fatigue. I know that there's definitely general TV watchers who aren't keeping up with every Marvel show, but I don't necessarily know that Marvel fatigue means anything kind of dire for the future of these stories.
Hello, my name is Jason Concepcion, and welcome to X-Ray Vision, the Crooked Podcast, where we would dive deep into your favorite shows, movies, comics, and pop culture. In this episode, in the previously on, we'll be commemorating the life and work of Kevin Conroy, the iconic voice of Batman and Bruce Wayne for millions of fans around the globe. We will be revisiting Black Panther Wakanda Forever after its opening week, and talking about the reaction to the film now a week out, and just the general topic of Marvel fatigue. Is it happening? What is it? What's going on? Do we care? So Kevin Conroy passed away on November 10th due to an ongoing illness, intestinal cancer, reportedly, and quite simply, he is Batman for millions of people, for 400 plus episodes of television, including his, legendary run on Batman the Animated Series. It's hard to really overstate the impact he had.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about a time when the Batman movies were coming out, obviously, still at this time, but the animated series felt connected to the quote-unquote spirit of Batman, of the character, in a way that was unique. And it's just impossible to even see a still from Batman the Animated Series and not hear that deep, baritone voice.
Yeah, I mean, so often over the years, especially, many years ago, pre-MCU, when superhero movies were, back at the top of the game again, most people of a certain age, if you asked them who the best Batman was or who their Batman was, they would say Kevin Conroy. The animated series was this all-encompassing, iconic thing that so many of us experienced, and that for many of us was the most regular Batman that we got. It was on TV. It was easy to follow. You could watch it. Also, it was, came out around the time of Batman Returns. It had a Danny Elfman score. It felt like it was connected to the movies, but it also felt like it was a part to the comics. It adapted everything from, the Dark Knight Returns to the most silly kind of playful elements of Batman. It also introduced Harlequin, obviously.
Huge impact right there.
And at the heart of it is Kevin Conroy and that performance. And for so long, Batman the Animated Series kept Batman alive in the hearts of DC fans and people who love superhero movies and people who don't, people who just like that show and love Kevin. And it's kind of I would say he's comparable to, Mark Hamill and Carrie. They kept Star Wars alive for a long time when the movies weren't coming out by doing cons and being present and having cameos and connecting with fans and keeping that conversation going and that love going. And Kevin was like that. And recently he'd actually written a comic in the DC Pride anthology that we talked about with Danny Fernandez called Finding Batman, which is about how growing up as a gay teenager was incredibly hard and how his journey to Batman and becoming Batman reflects that part of his life. It's absolutely amazing. DC actually put it up for free for people to read, so you can read it right now. And it's just, what an unbelievable loss. And I'm just really, one of the things I think is really special is Kevin actually got to play a future version of Batman in the live action CW stuff recently. So I love that we got to see that Batman become, the Kevin's face Batman rather than just his incredible voice. But never been a better time to go back and watch Batman the Animated Series, which is such a joy and still just one of the best TV shows ever made.
Connor Goldsmith, who hosts the Unbelievable Cerebrocast, one of the most indelible, unique, and fun podcasts about comics, specifically the X-Men, that is out there. It's absolutely vibrant with a really fun community. Tweeted the other day It's been lovely to see the whole comics internet coming together to celebrate Kevin Conroy. Apart from his unrivaled work as a voice actor, which will be immortal, I'm so sad that such an important gay elder is gone. He lived through so much and achieved so much. I'm grateful. It was such an important part of his story. Kevin Conroy, you will be missed. All right, we're a week plus away from Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and I've been interested to see just to take in the reaction, and specifically the reaction. I did a guest spot on the Recode podcast with Peter Kafka for Vox, and he was asking me about Marvel fatigue, and I wanted to talk to you about it, Rosie, because he was like, well, what do you think about Marvel fatigue? Some people are tired of it, or they're waiting for people to be tired of it. What do you think's going on? And it's been interesting that as Phase 4 has kicked off, it's been a huge topic. And I think there's various reasons for that. First of all, with regards to Marvel fatigue, it will happen if it's not happening now. Everything that is popular will at some point become less popular and stop happening. There's no reason to imagine that the Marvel movies will remain the top box office breaking movies in the world for the rest of our lives. Like, they will fall off at some point. But I think what's interesting to me is, having come from a writing background, somewhat of a criticism background, is I think a lot of what's happening is, as Marvel was going on its run all the way up through Endgame, I think that there were a lot of critics and people who like movies generally, just fan of movies generally, who thought, oh shit, is this what movies are going to be now? And we're not particularly, maybe they like 2 or 3 of the MCU movies, but we're not particularly fans of the movies, which is absolutely fine. You can like what you like and like what you don't like. But if I can also understand, if I was a critic who didn't like Marvel movies, I would be like, shit, am I out of a job if I tell? And I think now that Phase 4 has come out and it, didn't have the kind of narrative drive, I think that that Marvel...
it's not as cohesive as the other phases. It's
somewhat disparate. We're telling different stories about hidden societies, and there has been no central big bad to kind of shoot for over the course of the phase. I think that a lot of this is people just feeling more comfortable now to say, you know what, I don't like Marvel movies. Where in the past it would have been like you'd potentially get an email from your editor like, too bad. Like,
sorry. Look, I'm just saying, I'm not confirming or denying if that's the case, but I will say it sounds familiar. I'm saying that I think that is realistic, and I think there's 2 big things here, right? Yeah. One is that as comic book fans, as people who lived through the 90s boom, when comic books were everywhere, we've actually seen this before. The idea of fatigue on comics, or comics being the biggest thing in the world, and they're everywhere, and they're talking about Death of Superman on the news, and there's 500 people queuing up outside a shop to meet Rob Liefeld. We've lived through that. We've already lived through, this thing we love is now the most important thing in the world. In the early 2000s, to a certain extent, Spider-Man, X-Men. Yeah. So we know that these things are cyclical. If people are tired of Marvel, that's, like you said, it's to be expected. And I think the other thing that you can't kind of count out about the way that the conversation is going, especially on a critical lens, because, people have to watch all these things, multiple movies in a year.
Yeah, that's a big part of the critical texture.
I think that Disney Plus has been so influential for both better and worse. We love it. I mean, WandaVision to me, unbelievable. Like Jonathan Majors Kang, these are stories I never thought I would get to see. And if we weren't living in an age where, I'll put it in brackets, content, because I don't really like calling this stuff that, but like content is king, we probably wouldn't be getting a story based on a weird Scarlet Witch and Vision miniseries, or we wouldn't be venturing into the world of Kang if we hadn't already spent 10 years digging into some of the weirder parts of Marvel. But it, to me, is very understandable that certain people might be overwhelmed or tiring even quicker because of the fact that there are so many of these things to take note of. There are multiple weekly shows, and if you add Star Wars into it, then you're getting, and then you add all the other things Disney owns, Pixar, you know, there's multiple different versions. I will personally say the thing I think that is positive about this for people who don't like it or who do like it, Phase 4 to me is about a certain level of choice.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you.
For all different kinds of people. Now look, I love indie movies. I love world cinema. I love horror. I love B movies. I love Fantasia Fest. I always want to see more kinds of movies. So I understand that celebrating Disney for a certain amount of variety is like cheering on a monopoly. But I will say, I think Phase 4 is actually positive that it's not this huge cultural behemoth that is everyone has to like every movie. I actually think it's great that you can like love Eternals and not like Doctor Strange. I like both of them, just for clarification. I really like Doctor Strange. But I think the fact that there's more of this stuff and people can have varying degrees of conversation. Also, I am very much a person who says, if you don't like it, just that's fine. Like, you can actually just not like it. And there's been a lot of voices who, like you said, are feeling more comfortable. Does that relate to how people actually feel about Marvel movies? I don't necessarily think so. I mean, just to compare numbers, in the opening weekend of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, arguably probably the most anticipated movie of the year on a pop culture level.
Sure. Agreed.
That made 180 million domestic, 330 million worldwide in about 3 or 4 days. That is almost dollar for dollar the same amount that Black Adam made in like almost a month.
Yeah.
So there might be a critical fatigue. I know that there's definitely general TV watchers who aren't keeping up with every Marvel show, but I don't necessarily know that Marvel fatigue means anything kind of dire for the future.
I completely agree. I mean, which is interesting, which is why I wanted to raise it, because whenever the question is asked, or whenever I'm asked that, or whenever I hear that conversation, it's always framed as, you know, almost like, when is this over now? Is this whole thing over? And I think that we've gotten to a point where, to pick up on something you're talking about, whether Disney intended this or not, we've hit a point now with the movies, with the Disney Plus offerings, where it's kind of like, okay, what kind of Marvel do you like? Do you like spy shit? Do you like alien shit?
Do you like cosmic shit?
Do you like cosmic shit?
Weird shit?
Do you like weird shit?
Emotional?
Right. Do you want funny stuff? Do you want, and it's so... listen, I'm sure that Disney wants you to watch every single fucking movie and buy a ticket every
disclaimer,
movie.
we are watching them.
We are those people. Like, we are, we're in the tank for it, because this is what we have loved.
Yeah.
But I think we've also reached a point where popularity may wax and wane, but as a proposition, these movies and shows aren't really going to go anywhere. Like, the budgets may go up and down. They may release less movies per year. They may release less shows per year, which I think is probably possible.
More and more.
Yeah. Or they make more animated, whatever it is. But this stuff is here. Like, all this genre is here now, and it's not going anywhere for the foreseeable future, although, the density and the cadence of them may change.
And also, like, this is something that I've talked about with you guys, but like, these patterns have been seen before, right? Like, the X-Men movies, X1, X2, people loved those. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1 and 2, they loved them. Then you had, like, Tim Story's Fantastic Four, which I think are very fun, even though they disrespected Galactus, so I've never forgiven that in the second one. But, like, I feel like movies like Morbius, like, there's always going to be a dilution of quality when something becomes so saturated. So that's going to happen. And the real truth is that until a new movie comes out that has almost 100 years of source material for people to be like, I could make one of those too, these movies are going to keep being here. It's like, whenever I try and think about it, like, action movies, the trends, the blockbusters, the things that have happened before, it's hard to predict what that kind of zeitgeist shifting thing could be. It's unpredictable.
It's unpredictable. This is when I was working at The Ringer, we were doing binge mode, and Game of Thrones was coming to an end. Like a major part of the conversation was monoculture. And is this the end of monoculture with the end of Game of Thrones? Will there ever be anything that captures the imagination like this? And similar to Endgame was coming on the heels of the end of Game of Thrones. So it was like this feeling of, oh, have we exited the era of this huge, piece of cultural content that everybody takes part in, and no one, again, as you said, no one can predict what that thing is going to be. But if there's one thing I'm sure of, is that there will be another thing like that again and again and again. Because we crave, human beings crave it. We crave this massive story that we can all talk about with our friends or argue about and say, did you notice this? I noticed this.
The whole world is based on stories. Human culture has been based on stories, from the traditions of oral storytelling to religious texts, to, comic books. Like, I always remember I went to this unbelievable, it was like one of the best days of my life still. It was like a Mike Carey how to make comics
Mike Carey
little class. And it was so cool. And I love the stuff he did with Apocalypse, so I'm super into it. Yeah. And he said, if somebody just found like an entire run of the X-Men comics in 500 years, they would probably think that was like our Odyssey or some kind of real folklore that shaped. That is 50,000 plus issues. It's decades of human storytelling. It's analogous. It's not real, but stories really matter. And whether it's comic book stories, whether it's adaptations of Michael Crichton books like Jurassic Park, whether it's biographical films, whatever that next thing is going to be that kind of blows up the world, it's going to be about stories. And like you said, we're always going to find something else, especially with the internet, because that allows us to connect over these things in a way that was never possible before. And that's part of why we want the communal storytelling, the water cooler moments of Game of Thrones.